My name is Sister Eloise. I live in a small Carmelite convent just outside of Calistoga, California. The Napa Valley is known for its vineyards and soft hills, its lavender mornings and long, honeyed twilights. To most, it is a place of wine and beauty. To me, it is a place where the veil is thin. We live in silence for most of the day. The rhythm of prayer and labor is slow and unyielding, like the passing of a great clock just out of sight. But every so often, something interrupts that rhythm, something foreign, like a sour note in a sacred song. That happened on a Tuesday in late October. The trees were already dying with a kind of splendor, leaves like embers caught in the last warmth of the year. I remember because I had just come from tending to Sister Miriam, who was blind and increasingly confused. She kept saying strange things that week, talking to someone named Peter, who wasn't there. When I stepped outside to gather herbs, I heard the chapel bell ring. But no one was in the bell tower. We are not the type of order to indulge in superstition, but that bell never rings unless it is pulled by hand. And it was followed by something worse, a knock on the front gate. 3 knocks. I opened the door, and there he stood, a tall man, pale and soaked in sweat, as if he'd been running. His hair was graying, his eyes a strange, bright blue, too bright, like they had forgotten how to dim themselves. He held nothing. No bag. No ID. Just a trembling, half-smile that didn't belong to the rest of his face. "I need sanctuary," he said. That word chilled me. He didn't look homeless or dangerous. But there was something behind his voice, something hollow and echoing, like he had recently returned from a place where people do not speak. I asked him his name. "John." "John what?" He paused. "Just John." That's all that came back with me. I let him in. I shouldn't have. But I did. He slept in the guest room at the far end of the convent. The other sisters avoided him. Sister Claire said she saw shadows in the hallway outside his room at night, ones that didn't match his steps. Sister Miriam began calling him, the one who saw. The second day, he began speaking during lauds. No one had invited him. He stood in the chapel doorway and said, "I died last Thursday." No one responded. We kept singing, but I felt my throat dry. After prayers, I found him sitting on the floor outside the chapel, hands folded. "I was gone for 23 minutes, he said. No heartbeat. No breath. They brought me back. But I didn't come back alone." I asked what he meant. He didn't answer. Not yet. He only said, "There are rules about what the dead can say. But sometimes, when it's near the veil, and you're willing to listen, they bend." He stayed with us for 5 more days. And on the 6th, he finally told me what happened. Not the hospital part. Not the bright light, or the tunnel, that's the story everyone tells. His was different. Because he met him. And Jesus told him something that would not let him sleep again. Something about the soul. About how long it lingers. And why. He said it changes everything. But I'll tell you that part later. You see, in order to understand what John saw, you have to understand what he carried. He told me his story in the herb garden, under a gray morning sky. We were alone, except for the birds, which had all gone quiet the moment he sat down. As if something in the air knew what was about to be spoken. John's voice was slow, detached, the way a person speaks after watching a fire consume something they loved. He said, "It didn't happen like they say. There was no tunnel. No peaceful drift. I fell. Like a stone in a lake with no bottom. I fell until the light disappeared. And then I was standing in a hallway. Long, cold. Endless. It didn't look like anything evil. In fact, it looked like a hospital. But stripped of warmth, like it had been emptied of meaning. I walked for what felt like hours. There were doors. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. But they had no handles. Just names. Some of them I recognized. Not people I knew personally, but names I'd heard once. A childhood friend of my brother. A man from a news story. They were all real. I understood, somehow, that each door was holding someone. He looked up at me. Eyes rimmed in red. Then I heard it. A voice. Not loud, but final. It said, "You are not supposed to be here yet." I turned around. And there he was. John didn't say, "Jesus." He didn't need to. He didn't look like the paintings. Not soft. Not glowing. He looked like a man who had suffered. Skin like scorched olive wood. Eyes like oceans that had swallowed every war. And yet, there was no anger in him. Only grief. He asked me one question. "Do you know what you brought with you?" I didn't. He pointed behind me. I turned. There were people. Following me down that hallway. But not alive. Not glowing. They were attached. To me. One was a woman I'd forgotten. I cut her off in traffic once and laughed when she cried. One was a boy from school I bullied. And others, strangers. I asked, "Why are they following me?" And he said, "Because you never let them go. Or they never let you." That's when he showed me what no man should ever see. He paused. A crow cawed in the distance, sharp and jarring. I asked him what he meant. He looked down at his hands, shaking. He showed me how long a soul lingers when it's chained. Some for hours. Some for years. Some never leave. They stay. In kitchens. In childhood bedrooms. In empty churches and beneath trees where they were last loved. They wait for forgiveness. Or for someone to remember them rightly. And if no one does, they wander. Then he said, "This is not hell. This is the ache between." John wiped his face. He was crying. I asked him what I should do. And he said, "Go back. Tell them. Tell them to forgive. Tell them to release. Or they'll fill the world with ghosts who don't know they've died." He looked at me then. Straight through me. "I didn't come back with a mission, sister. I came back with a warning." And then he went silent. That night, the power in the convent flickered 3 times during evening prayers. No storm. No wind. Just darkness, in and out, like the breath of something too large to see. I asked John, before we all went to sleep. "Did he say anything else to you? Something you haven't told me?" He nodded. "Yes," he whispered. "He told me who stays the longest." He didn't speak the answer right away. He waited until the morning. I was in the chapel, sweeping ash from the small iron brazier we used for incense. John entered without sound. He had that look again, the one that made you feel like he wasn't fully here. Like his shadow had fallen behind him somewhere and not caught up. He sat in the front pew, placed his hands on the wood like it was an altar. Then he said, "He told me who stays the longest. The unspoken ones. The children no one mourns. The fathers who left and were cursed in silence. The women who died thinking they were unloved." His voice was steady, but the space around us felt like it had become too still, like the walls were listening. They stay because their names are never said again. And a soul needs to be remembered to move. He looked at the crucifix and asked me something no one had ever dared to ask me. "How many names do you remember, sister? Not saints. Not martyrs. The ones who weren't saved." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not because I didn't know the names, but because I did. He continued. "I saw them. When he opened that part of the veil. The ones who hover over places, hoping someone says, 'You mattered. You were more than the last thing you did.' One of them was a girl who died in a motel room in Missouri. I don't know her name, but she knew mine. She looked at me and said, "I thought someone would come back for me. And she's still waiting." I asked him then, with the fear of a child in my voice, "Is that purgatory?" He shook his head. "No. It's not punishment. It's the result of being forgotten. Jesus doesn't lock the doors. We do." There was silence between us for a long time. And then he said something that changed me. Forgiveness is not a favor. It's a key. Every time you withhold it, you keep someone in a hallway with no door. He stood up and walked out. I didn't see him again that day. But that night, something else happened. I was in my cell, praying. A wind moved through the room, though my window was closed. My candle flickered, and for a moment, just a moment, I smelled something. Chalk. Rust. Faint perfume. And I heard a voice. Very soft. A girl's voice. "I just want to go home." The next morning, I went to find John. His room was empty. But his bed was still warm. And written on the mirror in faint breath were the words, "You remember now." We searched for John until dusk. Sister Claire combed the orchards. I walked the perimeter of the convent, past the crumbling statue of Saint Dymphna, whose eyes had long since eroded into soft sockets of stone. No one found him. But all of us saw the same thing that night. Windows. Not the glass itself, but what stood behind them. It began after Compline. We were returning to our cells when Sister Miriam, who hadn't spoken coherently in days, suddenly grabbed my wrist and hissed, "Don't open the curtains. They're watching to see who still believes in them." At first, I thought she was hallucinating again. But then I saw the shape at the end of the hallway. A silhouette, unmoving, behind the arched window near the stairwell. It wasn't one of us. It didn't move like a sister. It didn't breathe. It waited. And I knew, deep down, what it was. It was one of them. The ones who stay. I returned to John's room just before midnight. His journal was gone. But in the drawer was a folded piece of parchment, old and frayed. It looked almost medieval, a reproduction maybe, but something about the ink felt warm, as if it had been written just hours before. It read, "There is a place beneath remembering, where the forgotten gather. It is not hell. It is not heaven. It is the hush between heartbeats. A silence that stretches forever, unless someone speaks the name aloud." There was no signature. That night, I dreamed, if you can call it dreaming. I was back in the chapel. Only there were no pews. No altar. Just chairs, arranged in a circle, all facing inward. In each chair sat a person I didn't know. But I felt them. One man had the hollow look of a veteran no one thanked. A woman clutched a Bible, her eyes locked in terror, like someone who had died afraid she wasn't really saved. And in the center of the circle, a little boy. No older than 7. His shirt was torn. He was barefoot. He looked up at me and said. I waited at the window, but no one came. "Can I go now?" I didn't know what to say. And then the floor beneath us, the whole chapel, opened, not with fire, but with a sound. A terrible rushing of wind and water and sobbing, a flood of voices, all saying the same thing. "Remember me. Please, remember me." I woke up screaming. It was 3:33 a.m. The convent was silent. But Sister Claire's door was wide open. And inside her cell, every icon had been turned facing the wall. She swore she hadn't touched them. In the morning, we found John. He was standing in the orchard. His arms outstretched. His eyes closed. He said, very softly, "They found me. Because I remembered." Then he opened his eyes and looked at me. "And now I have to show you where they live." He took me there at twilight. Not far, just past the edge of the orchard, where the grapevines fade into wild bramble and eucalyptus. We call it the old fence, though there hasn't been a real fence in years. Just a rusted iron post and the remnants of barbed wire, now buried beneath moss and thyme. John walked like someone retracing a path in a dream. Quiet. Intent. As though something beneath the surface of the world was calling him. I followed. The sky was bleeding orange and violet. The shadows were long. Then, without warning, he stopped and whispered. Here. I saw nothing, only weeds and broken earth, an old birdbath filled with black water. But John dropped to his knees and placed his hand flat on the soil. This is where it thins. The veil. Between the seen and the carried. And then he said something strange. Some places remember better than people do. Before I could ask what he meant, he began to pray, but not in English. Not Latin either. It was older. The words came from somewhere behind language. Like wind through a cave. Like the moan of the earth when no one is listening. I felt it then. A pull. Like something beneath my ribs was being gently pulled upward, not violently, but like a thread was being drawn out of my chest, towards something achingly sad and unspeakably familiar. Then the air changed. The wind stopped. The trees stilled. And the light around us dimmed, though the sun hadn't yet set. And I saw them. Not ghosts. Not shapes. But impressions. As if memory itself had taken form. A woman kneeling beside an invisible bed, weeping. A man with no eyes, pressing his forehead to a door that would not open. A girl with wet hair, holding something that had been a stuffed rabbit, staring at her own name carved into bark. John whispered, as though afraid they might hear too much. These are the ones who weren't let go. The ones bound by unfinished forgiveness, unsaid names, abandoned grief. They live here. In the hush between. I looked at one figure, a tall boy wearing a varsity jacket, his face frozen in regret. I felt the urge to ask his name, but John shook his head. Don't ask unless you're ready to carry it. And then the sky cracked. Not thunder. Not sound. But a rupture. A flash of memory that wasn't mine. A woman's voice screaming into silence. A baby left in the back seat of a car. A soldier falling to his knees beneath a red sun, whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." It was too much. I staggered back. Fell to my knees. John caught me and said, quietly. He showed me this place. Christ. He said, this is the ache of the earth, not hell, not purgatory. This is what happens when memory is exiled. We left as the first stars blinked open. He didn't speak again until we reached the chapel. And then, standing in front of the crucifix, he whispered. You asked what shocked me the most. I nodded. He said. The longest a soul stayed here, the one I saw, was 13 generations old. No one remembered her name. No one forgave her sin. And no one ever told her she could go. So she stayed. In the house that became a ruin. In the land that was paved. In the air people stopped believing could be sacred. I was shaking. He turned to me. We don't just haunt places, sister. We haunt each other. Every grudge. Every lie. Every unspoken sorrow. They all echo. Until someone brings them to the light. And then he said the words that changed me forever. He didn't show me this to frighten me. He showed me because it's getting worse. There are more now. More than ever before. I awoke to bells. But no one was ringing them. It was just past 3 a.m., that haunted hour between night and not quite morning. The convent was silent. Too silent. Even the insects had stopped singing. When I opened my door, the hallway lights were flickering. And at the far end, near the chapel, a shadow was moving. Slow. Deliberate. I thought it might be John. I was wrong. Inside the chapel, the candles were already lit. Dozens of them, far more than we had. They lined the pews, the altar, the windowsills. Every flame danced to the rhythm of something I couldn't hear. At the center of the room, a woman stood with her back to me. She was soaked, not with water, but with time. You could see it in her skin, her posture, like her body had been caught between centuries and grief. I took one step inside, and she turned. Her eyes were empty. Not blind, empty. And then, behind her, I saw John. Kneeling. Mouth open. But no sound coming out. I ran to him. Shook him. He didn't blink. The woman, or whatever wore her shape, pointed to the crucifix and said, "He remembers me. Why doesn't anyone else?" Her voice echoed across the walls like a name shouted into a canyon of centuries. I dropped to my knees beside John and whispered every prayer I knew. But the candles began to go out. One by one. Until only the flame before the tabernacle remained. Then I understood. This was no ghost. This was a memory that had become real through neglect. An echo fed by silence. By generations of forgotten prayers. By the weight of unspoken names. I stood. Looked into her hollow eyes. And I spoke. Not Latin. Not scripture. But a name. A name that came to me like breath in winter. Anna. She froze. The chapel stilled. Your name was Anna. You were born near the Delaware River. 1683. You died with a child in your arms. Alone. You prayed that someone, anyone, would speak your name again. Tears formed at the corners of her ruined eyes. And then, for the first time, she smiled. The air shifted. The candles relit themselves. And she was gone. John gasped like a drowning man breaking the surface. He looked at me. Hollow and whole at once. You heard her. I nodded. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. And then he said, very softly. That's why he sent me back. Not to preach. Not to warn. But to remember. Each soul you remember rightly. It's one less shadow in the hallways. It has been 2 years since that night. John has since disappeared again, into the world, into memory. Some say they've seen him in Appalachia, others in Arizona, standing outside churches with no name, asking strangers if they know the names of their dead. I stay here. In this convent. I light candles for those without mourners. I whisper names I find on forgotten headstones. I write prayers for the unloved. And some nights, when the wind carries the smell of ash and rose, I hear a voice just behind the veil. Thank you.